In this Clash of Clans video, we are going to break down and teach you the best Town Hall 12 attack strategy. The Queen Charge Lalo has long been top of the meta. It will help you get 3 stars, and whilst it can be tricky to perform, it can work across a variety of bases, which we are going to break down a couple of them for you here today. There are going to be similarities across the attacks, however definitely variations as well, so you can pick up different things from the 3 different attacks we have on display for you. The first one, we are going to be charging in towards the town hall, aiming to get the queen into this middle area where there are a couple of other targets here as well. The clan castle troops, the enemy queen, and the multi-inferno. All important buildings in order to take down, and whilst objectives of your queen charge can be interchangeable, you don't have to take one of them down. It's all about getting sufficient value, but also pathing. So in this instance, this entire bottom section will be taken down so that the Lalo can then just come around the top. So pathing and most importantly value alongside that as well. You've got to get a good mix of the two if you are using the queen charge. Otherwise you might just want to use a Sui method. Now in this one, how do we get the queen into the base? That is always the key thing. If your queen walks, you might not get it. You might be able to adapt. That is something that's important as well, and you will see a brilliant adaptation in this attack. But the king is used to funnel this left hand side. Meanwhile, a baby dragon funnels the right, with the target queen going into the center. Now one thing I really love is that as the king is deployed on this side, the queen is also deployed to take out these buildings and drive the king then up into this area where he can take out the archer tower, the cannon, and the enemy king as well. So let's get into the replay. If we need to pause and continue to teach you guys as we move through, we will continue to do so. And if you're new here to the channel, you want to see daily Clash of Clans videos, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. So you can see the king is doing his thing exactly as we discussed. 1 coconut loon here in order to test for black bombs, which we do receive one of them in order to protect the healers. Now this is something which you should get into good practice with. If you have a scout attack, then you can use that balloon anyway if you know the bomb is there. If it's a single format war such as the clan war leagues, you should be trying to think about where the black bombs potentially can be. Send a balloon in. If your healers go down, the healers are protecting your queen. If they go down, your queen's going to go down. Now because the enemy king is so close here, it actually pulls the queen to the side, not necessarily what we wanted. This can still be fixed though, because we can still get the queen into the base because the king has created such a good funnel on this little pocket. So the queen is going to slowly get through the clan castle troops. We've managed to wall break in so that she can still get to the town hall, but you will see how the adaptations occur. Now what I will say here is you can adapt this strategy to fit the base as best as possible. You might use jump spells, you might use the wall wrecker. I actually have the next replay in the video showcasing the wall wrecker, but probably the most efficient is the wall breakers. If you can time them in combination with your rage spell as well, only 1 wall breaker is needed to get a max level wall. If not, you will need 3 wall breakers, and also make sure you're sending in single wall breakers in order to test for small bombs before you send in your entire load of them. Now this is where the adaptation takes place, and it's quite subtle, but the queen was intended to come into this top compartment, stand pretty much on the town hall so that the jump spell could access that central compartment that we discussed with the multi, the queen, the expos. Yes, we're getting that amazing value, but we're also creating the pathing for the Lalo to come around the top. However, the queen has decided, because of the Tesla, to come into this little compartment. That might not seem like a big deal, but it really is, because as she walks along here, she takes out the wizard tower. She's now drawn to these buildings, and she will be determined to get there. She will actually break open this layer of wall in order to get through if she needs to. So in this instance, the jump spell is used right in this area to give access to the central compartment, and that was such an amazing adaptation, such brilliant placement, because it has to be perfect in between them walls as it is, making sure not to open up access to this outside wall, because she'd probably be more likely to go outside if it was. However, beautiful job with the jump spell. Queen gets into that central area, the ability is popped. Now there's nothing else you can do for the queen. Know when to quit in terms of the queen charge. Now you always want to try and keep the queen up, but know when you can shift your focus. So the queen's ability is used primarily because we've got the enemy queen and 2 expos shooting at her, so even with the rage, she wouldn't get through that. The ability has to be used, and there's now nothing else you can do. Yes, you could wait until potentially these buildings come out to create better pathing for the loons, but the loons have to get there first, so we might as well start the Lalo portion. Now, it depends on how much you're taking out of the base as to how many lava hounds you take. However, if you have successfully been able to send in the queen with the wall breakers, the stone slammer here can act as a lava hound in itself. Notice how it's just been kind of slowly shifting around the base, sniping off defenses, because you can easily predict its pathing. It just acts as a big balloon, but it also tanks like a lava hound. Just one lava hound, if you've got a huge queen charge, should suffice. Come in from a different angle to the stone slammer in order to check for black bombs, but also to tank as many air defense as possible. Now I know I've got the replay paused here, I'm just explaining the points to you guys. As we move through the video, you'll be able to just see it in a little bit more depth, but your deployment of loons is massive. What we need here is the loons to clump towards the eagle. Notice this gap around the eagle? That's actually to try and deter troops from getting to it as easily. So it would be very easy for the loons to just kind of come up and around it. That's why if we come in from different angles to this defense, here, eventually the balloons will actually come together into this central area. That's exactly what you want. You want the balloons to start out wide, surgically deploying them onto the defenses, and then merge in. Now what you also want is the balloons deployed enough so that when they get to the defense, they one-shot it. Notice that, even when they get to the eagle, one shot, and then they move on. Balloons work the best when they do that initial shot, because they really... I've got another point I want to make here for you in a second, guys. They basically do more damage as soon as they get to a defense, so bang, you want them to have that one shot and move on. Otherwise, they kind of hover above the defense, they're kind of just stuck there for a little bit. That's not what you want, because they're taking damage that whole time. So try and visualize how many balloons you need on each defense on the outside, and then where they will clump so that they also one-shot the defense on the inside. It's very difficult, it's a skill in itself, but it will definitely get easier the more you practice it. Coming down to the end of the base, we've got 3 splash damage defenses here. You've got to use your spells wisely in order to get through splash. That's pretty much it. Point defense, you're kind of okay with unless it's an area with huge amounts of point defense, but splash is where you want to use your spells. And because the Grand Warden's ability was not used for the Town Hall, we can also use that here, leading into the multi, into that Wizard Tower. Notice that we still have balloons getting pushed around the outside in order to snipe off the buildings and keep the main focus of the loons in the center. Otherwise, they would start splitting off to the outside here. You want that big push through the center of the base and just reinforce on the outside as necessary. Coming to the final Wizard Tower, could potentially have sent in 1 balloon here to distract. However, that was not needed in this case because the Wizard Tower was already on the Grand Warden. But just know when you're planning your attacks, as you get to the end of the attack and your balloons will naturally clump up, you can use your spells to get through the splash. And if it's just a Wizard Tower, obviously a multi you can't do this, but a Wizard Tower you can use 1 balloon on the outside, and it might always be good, as you've seen in this instance, to save a balloon for cleanup, but you should also have the minions as well. We now have a replay with the Wall Wrecker, so let's move to that now. For the second replay, the Wall Wrecker is going to be used in conjunction with the Queen Charge, and I will explain why that is. The Wall Wrecker comes in from this top area, aiming to come through obviously to the town hall, but it's not going to get that far. Now, all of the attacks in this video are by CruncHTime in our perfect war versus Costa Rica Drak. If you're interested in joining us here at CruncHTime, maxed out Town Hall 12s, you can join my Discord server in the description, and you will find everything you need to know about joining CruncHTime. So, how do we get the queen into the base here initially, into this area? Well, the funnel is very nicely set up with 2 balloons onto the cannon, and that is enough for this funnel on this side, amazingly. I mean, such an easy funnel to make, and that's one thing that you want to take note of as well. If you're charging your queen into an area, can you get the funnel created easy enough, or is there a different area where you could charge the queen in, not necessarily get as much value, but if the funnel is so much easier, so much cheaper to make, then it might actually be better. King, again, is a great troop to make the funnel, placed on this left hand side to power down this way, take out all of this so that the queen will come in. So let's go ahead and start the replay, and then I do want to explain why the wall wrecker is used in this instance. A lot of the time the wall breakers, I would say, in combination with the plus or minus jump spell, is the best. However, in this instance the wall wrecker gets through that initial layer. Now, we could have wall braked the initial layer, however we have a multi-inferno, so straight away you've got to use a freeze spell on the multi-inferno in order to break open that initial layer, and that's just one layer. We could have tried to double layer wall break, but that would basically mean that we'd have to freeze the multi. We clip that expo as well. We might have been able to do it, but that's sending in a lot of wall breakers. Might have wanted to rage there in order to make sure, but the rage would have been wasted. So it's a risky double wall break is what I'm saying, guys. Plus you've got to use the freeze onto the multi. Then even if you get the double wall break, you're using a jump here. Probably your jump's going to be used here though, so you're already using a bunch of spells is the assumption on that bit, just to get the wall breakers in. So what happens if we use the wall wrecker? Well, the wall wrecker tanks for itself, so that will get through no problem. We don't need to worry about freezing this multi, trying to double wall break, not necessarily needing a second jump because the wall wrecker can get through, so we're saving on spells already, not to mention that a rage is potentially not needed for the queen earlier on. In this case I probably wouldn't have used one anyway, but it can save you, this is what I'm saying. However, you also have the troops inside. A lot of the time I would go with ice golems in there. Main reason, you don't want the healers to come across to, let's say, a P.E.K.K.A here. The ice golems can work really well, or maybe even loons to just push ahead and flush anything out. Check for black bombs. A loon in there is also good for that reason, but the rage spell, typical black bomb goes off and the loons didn't get it. Anyways, rage spell is used afterwards, but I think one would have been needed well before that if the ice golems weren't freezing all of the troops, the queen, everything like that. Then the jump spell comes in and the queen gets into the center. So essentially it is tricky to use a wall wrecker. However, in this case, it was recognized that we would be committing a lot of spells, and it's tricky to get the wall breaker in, so we've got more spells for the Lalo. We've got more troops for the Lalo. Now that the queen is into the center, we've got two options. Either we Lalo from here, or we Lalo down to the town hall from the left hand side instead. Town hall is always the better option, or 90% of the time it's the better option, because one, you're going to get that town hall, but also look at where the queen is here. She's going to basically walk across to this side. She's going to be able to get some of the buildings here and potentially the buildings over on this right side, but what she's not going to get is the buildings right over there by the town hall. So the queen still has all of the healers on her. She still has the ability, so let her take some damage. If you send the Lalo in front of the queen, then she can't get that damage. She's actually then just pointless. She might as well be a wizard. cleaning out a free building. Let her take some damage, your troops can take damage, and you can get through the base. And that's something you want to do, especially if you've committed the healers to it. Grand Warden's ability in this case, I know I didn't mention it in the first one, but if you are hitting the Town Hall, you've got to use that Grand Warden's ability over the Giga Bomb, otherwise your loons will go down. You might want to rewind maybe 20 seconds or so and just see the deployment of the loons nice and surgical there initially, in order to ensure that they clumped onto the Town Hall. Now this is what we're talking about again, guys. Whether you surgically put your balloons in, you actually do want them to clump as they get that swoop around the base. But look, we have the combination of the haste to get them to the multi and then the freeze. This freeze spell could have been used up on the wizard tower instead, potentially misplaced a little bit there. Tornado trap also in the area, but the attack was done so successfully that we have so many balloons around that area. Minions cleaning up, queen still alive. If you can keep that queen alive, great, but if not, it's no worry, guys, as long as you get that value. Like I said, what you don't want to do is send the Lalo in front of the queen if she's perfectly capable of taking out more defenses. We have one more replay for you on the best Town Hall 12 attack strategy. This is the final base of this video that is taken down using the queen charge into Lalo. For this one, we use a bowler bounce in order to funnel initially onto these buildings, then turns and successfully starts doing work onto the two storages here, which is nice, but that basically then allows the king to power through these buildings and wipe all of this out. Now, do not forget about the bowler bounce, guys. It is an incredible use of 6 troop capacity in order to create that funnel, and something that you definitely want to be looking at when you're thinking of creating your funnel. Queen is going to come into the Town Hall here initially in order to make sure she doesn't continue to walk, because we want her to then direct into the base. The Archer Tower will be taken out by 3 balloons and a baby dragon to help flush this bottom section in order to force the queen in. So it's taking out the buildings on the outside, but it's also making sure that there are buildings on the inside that will draw the queen in. So there is the bowler bounce. Basically, guys, you want to create the funnel as cheaply as possible, but time is a factor here as well. You want to be able to create that funnel very quickly. Let's say if we put an archer in there and we wasted 20 seconds, that's not necessarily a good trade-off. Although it's less troop capacity to get the funnel, it's not better, because you have to be time efficient as well. So the king has brilliantly taken out this side of the base, but unfortunately lured the clan castle troops. You can see the balloon just about going down. That looks kind of cool, actually. Just as the balloon is about to hit the floor, and the baby dragon has now free range to take out the other side. So pretty straightforward. Town Hall goes down. I mean, in a single attack format war, this is fantastic. I haven't even mentioned that up until this point. The Queen Charge Lalo is a brilliant safe 2-star strategy. Main reason being that you can change the Lalo to come in from wherever you want. So let's say you were charging in from the opposite side of the Town Hall, you might then just send the Lalo in from the other place if you know the attack is starting to go pear-shaped. So the queen comes into the base with use of the jump spell. There is a lava hound in the clan castle. That is purely to defend against a queen charge, because queen charges are very powerful nowadays. I mean, they're not powerful in that regard. They've always been powerful. It's just they're hard to use. So they are popular as ever, and the lava hound is to try and defend against that. Beautiful use of the queen charge here to get the queen in, take out the multi. She's just about to get to this area where we have the eagle and queen combination, and what I want to show at this point, I was waiting for the slammer to be deployed, was that the sweepers are pointing in the opposite directions. Now a lot of the time that means you with an air attack would try and come behind the sweepers, but don't forget that when you're queen charging into a base, the healers are air troops. So that's something you need to take into consideration. Whilst your queen could charge into, let's say, this area, for example, hypothetically, you've got to take into consideration that the air sweeper is pushing your healers back, and you're going to have a couple of seconds there where the queen is vulnerable with no healers. You might end up using more rage spells because of that. You might not even get the area down because of that, so do consider the sweepers. Now this is more of a symmetrical base at this point. Could have probably LavaLooned from this side as well. Reason I think we come in from the bottom is there's these section of defenses and 2 air defenses within that, whereby there's no sweeper coverage. So we have to take this down first in order to then get around this way, and then we will be in contact with the sweeper. But the queen's going to get to the center of the base and start taking them out relatively soon anyway, so it's not the end of the world. She takes out the sweeper on the right hand side, but being time conscious, the LavaLoon has already started. Now whilst we still have the queen's ability, we're not going to be committing any more rage spells there, and you can always have someone on voice as well. Arguably queen's ability was popped early here, but sometimes you have to shift your focus across attacks, and the Queen Charge LavaLoon, once you start getting into the LavaLoon deployment, you might have to just solely focus on that. It might be very difficult to go back and keep checking on your queen, so I think that's why the ability was just used. We got the value we wanted. Don't lose it, just use it. Good old saying, guys. The only time you wouldn't want to use the queen's ability is if it was going to mean you popped a hound. So we had that good spread of loons from either angle. The haste spell used initially in order to get onto the multi. Grand Warden's ability encompasses all of the loons. You want to try and do that. Basically, you might see a point in a raid where the loons kind of split into different directions. That's when the Grand Warden's ability wants to be used, to get all of them invincible and when they split, because then you can't use it as effectively after that. So that's the prime time to use it. Minions still around the base. Haste, the splash damages, you might freeze them as well. If you're clumping the loons into the center of the base, that might be where you use the heal or the rage spell, but with a queen charge, it's probably more the haste or the freeze. Did I say rage and haste? I think I meant rage and heal. But guys, I hope this video has helped you out. If you want to see a pro tips interview with one of our best Queen Charge LavaLoon attackers, Feith, I will be sure to link that video here. He breaks down his attacks in great depth. You will enjoy it. But that wraps it up for this one. Until next time, peace out.